They didn't hit me. They didn't scream. They just smiled across a dinner table and asked me to apologize for being robbed. That's the thing about quiet betrayal. It wears a nice shirt, sits in your family's favorite chair, and carves your name off everything you built. My brother didn't just steal my work. He stole 6 years of 2 a.m. breakthroughs, of calloused fingertips on a keyboard, of ideas that crawled out of my skull and onto a screen while the rest of the world slept. And my parents lit candles, set out the good china, and told me to say sorry. This is the story of how I said fine instead, and then walked out the door and never looked back. Welcome to Echoes of Us. Get comfortable. This one doesn't have a villain with a mustache to twirl. It has a dining room, a family that loved wrong, and a girl who finally stopped letting them. The Hargrove family lived in one of those Midwestern towns where the biggest news was whose kid made the honor roll and who was building what addition to their house. We had a flagpole in the front yard, a neighbor who made jam every fall, and the particular kind of quiet that people from those places mistake for peace. My father, Gerald Hargrove, 56, was a retired civil engineer who ran the household like a blueprint. Everything had a load-bearing purpose, and he decided what carried weight. My mother, Patricia, 53, kept the house immaculate, volunteered at the library, and loved her children the way some people love unequally without knowing it. She poured from the same heart, but one cup always got more. And then there was Marcus, my brother, 28. 6'1", firm handshake, the kind of man who walked into a room and made it rearrange itself around him. Senior systems architect at Vantage Corp, a tech firm with offices in 4 states. Engaged to a woman named Cassidy, who dressed like a magazine cover and smiled like she meant it. My parents called Marcus their North Star. They said it out loud at dinner tables in Christmas cards. And then there was me, Naomi Hargrove, 23. Senior at a state university my parents chose because it was affordable and close enough to visit on holidays. GPA 3.97. Research assistant under a professor who actually read my work. Not invisible exactly, more like a piece of furniture that everyone sits near but nobody really sees. I didn't mind the shadow. What I minded was discovering that my brother had been standing in it, quietly going through my things. Here is what I need you to understand about the kind of work I did. It happened in a place the rest of my family had never set foot in and would not have understood if they had. 3rd floor of the Callaway Engineering Building. A computer lab that smelled like burnt coffee and old carpet. Fluorescent lights, one of them perpetually humming a half-step flat. I'd sit at the same terminal every night with my headphones in and work on the kind of problems that required silence and stubbornness in equal measure. For nearly 2 years, I'd been building something that mattered. A dynamic pattern learning algorithm. A system capable of identifying inefficiencies in massive datasets and recalibrating its own logic in real time. The kind of thing that, if it worked the way I believed it would, had real-world applications in logistics, healthcare, climate modeling. My research advisor, Dr. Constance Bell, 61, silver-haired and professionally allergic to praise she didn't mean, had reviewed my early drafts and looked at me over her reading glasses. "Naomi," she said, setting the pages down like they were fragile. "This is doctoral-level work. Why are you still here?" My parents said this school was fine. She didn't respond right away. She opened her desk drawer, pulled out a brochure, and slid it across to me. A university in Maryland I'd only ever glimpsed in rankings I scrolled past because hope felt irresponsible. "Apply," she said. "You've outgrown this place." I tucked the brochure in my bag and didn't tell anyone at home. My laptop ran old and slow, so I kept backup copies on the family cloud account, a shared drive my father had set up years ago for tax files and vacation photos. A practical solution. A catastrophic mistake. I didn't know yet that Marcus had been opening those files. 43 times. Sunday dinners at the Hargrove house were sacred. Patricia used her grandmother's serving dishes, lit a vanilla candle, made the same herb-roasted chicken every week, like clockwork. Marcus was usually 40 minutes late. Nobody said a word about it. The Sunday I'm thinking about, early October, 2 months before everything broke open, Marcus arrived smelling like a department store and launched into a story about a new project at Vantage Corporation: adaptive data optimization, pattern recognition, self-correcting logic in large data pipelines. He used the terminology with the casual confidence of someone who had rehearsed it, but the words were mine. Every last one. Gerald leaned back with that chest-puffed pride. That's my boy. I set my fork down. I'm presenting a paper next month on adaptive optimization at the Undergraduate Research Symposium. Patricia turned to me with that patient smile she used when she wanted me to feel acknowledged without actually listening. That's wonderful, sweetheart. And then, to Marcus. Marcus, tell your father about Vantage's new contract. Marcus looked at me across the table and winked. Not a brotherly wink. A card player's wink. The kind that says, I see you. I just don't care. That wink cost him everything.
He just didn't know it yet.
The first time Marcus stole from me, he called it asking for help. I was 15. He was 20, a year into his master's program and, as he described it, drowning in a systems design project. Can you just walk me through your approach? He said on the phone. The logic you used for that data sorting project you built. I didn't walk him through it. I rebuilt it from scratch while he described what his professor needed. 3 hours of work. He got an A. When I saw the grade on his refrigerator at Thanksgiving, I said, I thought you said you rewrote it. He grinned. I cleaned it up. My mother, drying dishes nearby. He's your brother, Naomi. Family helps family. That became the template. Marcus would call late. Always urgent. Could I explain this? Could I sketch out that? Could I just take a look? And each time I did, something transferred, not just code, but confidence. His confidence that he could keep taking. My silence that he was allowed to. The night he received his job offer from Vantage Corp, Gerald popped cheap champagne and the cork hit the ceiling. Everybody celebrated. Nobody in that kitchen knew that the capstone project that had gotten Marcus the offer had been built on an algorithm I'd written at 17. I clapped. I smiled. I filed it away. It arrived on a Wednesday at 11:14 p.m. I was deep in a debugging session when the notification appeared. The sender was someone named Julian Park. Subject line. Question about your optimization research. I opened it. Hi, Naomi. I came across your working paper on dynamic pattern learning algorithms while investigating a similar problem at my company. I noticed significant structural similarities between your framework and the core logic of a data platform recently patented by Vantage Corp, attributed to a Marcus Hargrove. Were you involved in the development? I'd love to understand the relationship between the two projects. Julian Park, former senior engineer, Vantage Corp. I read it 3 times. Then I opened Vantage Corp's technology blog and searched my brother's name. His author page loaded. 4 published posts about his adaptive data platform. The architecture diagrams were mine. The logic flow was mine. The variable names were different. He'd swapped them out the way someone changes fonts on a plagiarized essay, but the structure was identical. The recursive logic, the self-correction mechanism, the particular way I'd solved the load redistribution problem after 14 months of failed attempts.
Mine.
Every line. I went to the family cloud drive. Navigated to my project folder. Clicked on the access history. 43 entries. Marcus had opened my files 43 times over the course of 3 years, timestamps at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., weekends when I was at conferences, holidays when I was asleep down the hall. I sat in that lab for a long time. The bad fluorescent light hummed its flat note. The processors breathed their steady hum. My coffee went cold. I didn't cry. I just sat there and counted. 6 years multiplied by every promotion he'd received. 43 unauthorized access logs. 1 brother. 1 dinner table where I'd been passing him the salt. Dr. Bell read my printouts without interrupting. Then she set them down and looked at me with the focus of someone who has made important decisions before and knows exactly what they require.
What do you want? She asked.
Revenge or your future? I wanted to say both. I said, Can I have until Tuesday? She almost smiled. Here was the problem with confronting Marcus immediately. My parents controlled my tuition. My only financial lifeline. If I went to that dinner table tonight and put everything on the table, Gerald would circle the wagons, Patricia would cry, and I would be cut off. No apartment, no lab access, no final semester. I'd burn my entire life down to make a point, and Marcus would still have his job, his degree, and his story. Because in the Hargrove family, his story always ranked higher than mine. But if I waited, if I applied for the transfer first, secured an exit, built the documentation properly, then I could leave on my terms, with somewhere to go. The transfer deadline, I said. March 1st. I've already drafted your recommendation letter, Dr. Bell said. I was waiting for you to ask. I spent that night organizing what I had. Repository commit history with timestamps predating Marcus's patent application by over a year. Research notes, handwritten, dated, cross-referenced. Email threads with Dr. Bell tracking every version of the algorithm's development. The evidence was all there. It had always been there. I just had to arrange it into something that couldn't be argued with. I submitted the transfer application on February 27th. Then I went home and helped my mother peel potatoes for Sunday dinner. Sat across from Marcus. Laughed at his stories. Passed the bread basket. There is a kind of patience that looks like weakness from the outside. It isn't. It's the patience of a person who already knows how the story ends. March through May was a masterclass in self-control. Marcus got bolder as the months passed, which is what happens when someone has never been caught. He mentioned a performance bonus in April, bought Cassidy an engagement ring, announced in May that his team was presenting the algorithm to Vantage's executive leadership. If they approved national scaling, he was looking at VP of engineering by 30. Gerald raised his glass. Patricia cried happy tears. In late May, Marcus called me at 11:40 p.m. Quick question, he said, his voice casual, unbothered. The recursive correction layer, does it destabilize above 8 million data entries, or does the load balancing hold? He was asking me to explain in real time the internal mechanics of code he had publicly claimed to have written. It holds, I said. There's a dampening sequence in the third loop. It distributes excess load before the system can cascade.
Right.
Right, I knew that. Just confirming. After I hung up, I opened the document I'd been quietly building for months and added a line. May 28th. Marcus called at 11:40 p.m. requesting technical explanation of the recursive correction layer, the core mechanism of the algorithm he claims to have authored. He could not recall the dampening sequence without assistance. Duration: 18 minutes.
One more line.
One more proof. June 1st, 6:07 a.m. My phone screen lit up my dark bedroom ceiling. The email had a university crest I'd memorized from a brochure I'd kept in my desk for 8 months. The subject line was 3 words. I read it once. Then I set the phone down on the nightstand and let the morning light slowly fill the room. I didn't whoop. I didn't call anyone. I just lay there while the sunrise turned everything gold and let the relief settle into me like something I'd been waiting to exhale for years. I had my way out. 2 days later, I confirmed my enrollment quietly from a coffee shop with no audience, no celebration. Marcus called that same week with his request. He needed help refining the recursive layer for Vantage's executive board presentation. Sure, I said. I can take a look. You're the best, Naomi. Seriously. Family helps family, I said. He laughed. He actually laughed. I hung up and added it to the document. My mother called on a Monday. Her voice had that particular brightness, the kind that meant a decision had already been made and was being presented as an invitation. Friday dinner. Your father has something he'd like to discuss. Marcus and Cassidy will be here. I knew. Before I'd driven a single mile, before I'd walked through that door, I knew I was waiting at that table. They were going to ask me to apologize. For my attitude. For my distance. For making Marcus feel unwelcome at family events I had simply stopped attending because the price of attending was too high. I spent Thursday night on my apartment floor surrounded by sealed boxes and packing tape. 11 of them, labeled and stacked. The rental van was booked for 6 a.m. Saturday. My key was already on the kitchen counter. That night, I finalized the email I'd been drafting for 3 weeks. 2 recipients, Vantage Corp's Office of Corporate Compliance and the Academic Integrity Committee at Marcus's graduate school. Attached, a 44-page timeline, a side-by-side code comparison with timestamps, the cloud access logs, and Dr. Bell's signed letter confirming my sole authorship. All I had to do was press send. Not yet. Friday 1st. One last chance. I pulled a USB drive from my desk, brushed silver, about the size of my thumb. On it, a simple visual presentation I'd built in a single afternoon. My files on the left, timestamps highlighted in green. Marcus's submissions on the right, timestamps in red. Months later, same architecture, different variable names. A mirror, not a weapon, just in case they needed to see what I'd been seeing. The dining room smelled like rosemary and inevitability. Cassidy's white sedan was in the driveway. Marcus's black SUV blocked the hydrant as usual. My mother hugged me at the door a beat too long. The grandmother's china was on the table. Candles lit. Red wine from the high shelf. Gerald sat at the head with his hands flat on the table and his shoulders squared. Not a man having a conversation, a man delivering a verdict. Small talk circled the table like a moth around a flame. Cassidy mentioned florists. My mother talked about reception venues. Marcus ate quickly and kept his eyes on his plate. Gerald cleared his throat.
Naomi.
Your mother and I need to address something. He straightened. The sentence that followed had clearly been rehearsed. Your brother has expressed concern that you've been distant, cold, unsupportive of his accomplishments. Marcus looked up from his plate. His eyes were glistening. His chin quivered, the practiced tremble of a man who has weaponized sentiment so many times he can deploy it on command. I just miss my sister, he said softly. I only want things to go back to how they were. Patricia reached across the table and squeezed his hand. He's been so upset, she murmured, as though I weren't sitting 4 feet away. Gerald continued. Your brother has done nothing but make this family proud. And you've sat there with this attitude, this jealousy, making him feel unwelcome. We're not asking much, Naomi. Just apologize.
Clear the air.
Move forward as a family. He reached for his wine. And until you do, he added, almost as an afterthought, your mother and I have decided to pause our contribution to your tuition. For your own good. The silence after that was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. Cassidy stared at her plate. Patricia nodded, eyes wet, loyal to the script. Marcus pressed his lips together. Not remorseful. Anticipating. I set my knife and fork down, parallel, the way Patricia had taught me when I was 8 years old. I looked at each of them, my father, my mother, my brother, and I said, fine. Gerald's shoulders dropped. A smile broke across his face, the satisfied kind, the kind a man wears when the world bends the way he expected. Patricia exhaled and put a hand to her chest. Marcus sat back, arms folded. They thought I was surrendering. I pushed my chair back and stood up. Fine, I said again. You can keep the tuition. I don't need it anymore. The smile on Gerald's face didn't disappear. It froze. I've been accepted to transfer to a university in Maryland. Full merit scholarship. I confirmed my enrollment 2 days ago. I leave tomorrow morning. Nobody moved. The candles kept burning. Cassidy's fork slipped from her fingers and hit the china. She didn't pick it up. You what? Gerald's voice had lost its authority, the way a building loses structural integrity. Quietly, then all at once. Marcus had gone white. Not gradually. All at once, like someone had pulled a drain plug. Angela, wait, he pushed his chair back. Let's talk about this privately. Let's, I said. and I sat back down. I opened my laptop bag, set the computer on the table between the pot roast and the wine, and opened the presentation. 2 columns filled the screen. My files on the left. Marcus's submissions on the right. Green timestamps. Red timestamps. The same architecture. The same logic. The same elegant recursive structure I had spent 14 months perfecting. Renamed, resubmitted, claimed. "Dad," I said, "your son has been submitting my code as his own work for 6 years. Everything, the promotions, the patent, the VP track, all of it is built on mine." Gerald stared at the screen. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Marcus tried the only move left. He pivoted to victim. "She's lying." His voice broke on the second word. "She's jealous. She probably faked those timestamps. This is some kind of revenge, because I got everything she wanted." "Explain the recursive correction layer," I said. "Right now. Walk us through how it works." Silence. "You told Dad it took you 8 months to develop. So explain it." His jaw worked. His eyes moved from face to face, looking for rescue. Finding none. "It was a collaboration," he said finally, the lies so thin you could see daylight through it. "She helped me build it." "You called me at midnight 3 weeks ago," I said quietly, "because you couldn't remember the dampening sequence in the code you claimed to have written. You didn't know how it worked, Marcus, because you didn't write it." Cassidy stood up.
She didn't make a scene.
She picked up her purse from the sideboard, said, "Excuse me," and walked to the front door. The latch clicked shut behind her.
Soft.
Final. Patricia buried her face in her hands. "Angela," she whispered, "why didn't you tell me?" "I told you 100 times, Mom. Every time you said family helps family." Gerald hadn't moved. He sat at the head of his table, staring at the screen, a man looking at the structural report of a building he thought was sound, learning, too late, that the foundation was borrowed from someone else. I closed the laptop, put on my jacket, picked up my bag. "I'm leaving in the morning. I won't be back for a while." I walked past the hallway photos, Marcus at every stage, every milestone, every achievement, the whole wall a monument to someone else's borrowed life. Near the coat closet, almost hidden, one photo of me. 9th grade science fair. First place ribbon. Nobody had asked what the project was about. I left it there. I didn't take it with me. Some pictures belong to the house that never really fit you. 5:30 came fast. I hadn't really slept, just floated in the shallow waters between exhaustion and clarity. I loaded 11 boxes into the rental van by myself.
No help.
Nobody knew. The June morning was cool and damp, dew sitting on the grass like scattered glass beads. I moved box by box. Books, winter clothes, a framed photo of my grandmother, my laptop case, a coffee mug from Dr. Bell that read syntax error, please reboot, a department joke that only the two of us found funny. I did a final pass through the apartment.
Bare walls.
Bare mattress. The ghost of a poster still visible in the paint. The key on the counter, like a period at the end of a sentence. I locked the door from the outside and dropped the key through the mail slot. 14 missed calls on my phone. 10 from Patricia. 4 from Gerald. 0 from Marcus. He knew better. I stopped for gas and burnt coffee just past the county line. Stood next to the van as the sun came up, orange and pink spreading across the horizon like something being painted for the first time, just for me. And I smiled. Small, real, involuntary. The kind that comes not from winning but from finally being done carrying something that was never supposed to be yours to carry. I drove east into the sunrise. I didn't look back. 2 weeks into my new life, the investigation began. A formal email from Vantage Corp's compliance office. Documentation received. Inquiry opened. Please retain all original files. 3 days later, a message from Julian Park. Marcus had been suspended pending the outcome. Badge deactivated. Systems access revoked. I was sitting under oak trees in a courtyard when I read it. Students walked past carrying iced coffees and debating things I hadn't had the space to debate before. I didn't celebrate. I didn't post. I just sat there and let the quiet land. September brought the academic committee's ruling. Dylan Adams, Marcus Hargrove. 3 words. Master of Science degree. Revoked. The credential that had launched his career, the proof of expertise that Vantage Corp had relied on when they promoted him, struck from the record. Vantage moved within the same week. Formal termination. Legal proceedings to recover $175,000 in performance bonuses paid under false pretenses. Marcus called on a Thursday. Do you have any idea what you've done? No greeting. Just heat. I stopped pretending, I said. It was just code, Naomi. Lines on a screen. I improved it, I deployed it, I made it into something. You called me at midnight because you couldn't explain the dampening function. In your own presentation. About your own algorithm. Silence. Pull the complaint, he said, quieter now. Tell them it was a collaboration. We can fix this.
No.
I'm your brother. I know, I said. That's what made it so much worse. I hung up. Patricia called 3 times before I answered. Her voice was stripped of its usual brightness, like a surface that's been sanded down to the grain. Your father isn't eating. Marcus might face a civil suit. Cassidy called off the engagement. A long pause. How did we get here, Angela? You got here because every time I told you what Marcus was doing, you told me to be a good sister. I didn't know it was this much. You didn't want to know, Mom. She was quiet for a while. Then she said what she'd really called to say. Your father co-signed Marcus's mortgage. If Marcus loses his income, your father is liable for $340,000 on his retirement. I closed my eyes. Let the full weight of that settle. Mom, I love you, but I won't set myself on fire to keep Marcus warm. Not anymore. Tell Dad I'm sorry about the mortgage, truly. But Marcus signed that loan on a salary he didn't earn. That's between him, Dad, and Vantage Corporation. A sound from her end. Something between a sigh and a swallow. You used to be such a sweet girl, she whispered. I still am, Mom. I'm just not a quiet one anymore. She hung up without saying goodbye. I understood. Some goodbyes are too complicated for a phone call. By the following June, here is where things stood. My side. 4.0 GPA, first year at Maryland. 1 published paper in a peer-reviewed journal. A summer research fellowship at an AI lab that accepted 12 applicants from a pool of 200. A desk by a window with my name on a placard outside the door. A new advisor, Dr. Priya Anand, precise and brilliant, who read my algorithm before I set foot in her office and told me on our first meeting, this is exceptional work. The self-correction mechanism is elegant in a way that most senior researchers don't achieve in a decade. I almost didn't know how to respond. Nobody had ever aimed that word at me before. Marcus's side, terminated from Vantage Corporation master's degree officially revoked. Civil lawsuit pending. Vantage's legal team seeking recovery of $175,000 in wrongfully obtained compensation. Living in our parents' spare bedroom. Applying for jobs that required explaining a 6-year gap built on credentials he no longer held. Gerald was making monthly payments on a co-signed mortgage for a house Marcus could no longer afford. $2,600 a month from a retired engineer's pension. Patricia had started therapy. I learned this not from her, but from a card that arrived in my campus mailbox in May. 3 lines on cream stationery in her careful cursive, the letters slightly shakier than I remembered. I'm learning. It's hard. I miss you. I held that card for a long time. I put it in my desk drawer. Not ready to answer. Not ready to throw it away. Cassidy texted me in November. Short, no emojis. Angela, I know we were never close, but I wanted you to know I left Marcus. Not because of what you did. Because of what he did. I've been replaying everything. Every time I asked about the technical details, he'd get this look like I was too slow to understand. Turns out I was asking exactly the right questions. He just didn't have the answers. I typed back, "I'm sorry you got caught in this. You deserved better." A pause. Then, "So did you." 3 words from a woman I'd shared 4 Thanksgiving dinners with. They landed harder than anything my parents had said. Gerald called on a Sunday evening in October. His voice sounded different. Smaller. Like a man trying to fit himself through a door he'd built too narrow. "I need you to understand something." I didn't know the extent of it.
You didn't look, Dad.
That's not the same as not knowing. Silence. A long, slow breath. "I raised that boy to be," he stopped. The word successful hung in the air, unsaid. "It's funeral too fresh for eulogy." "You raised him to believe he could take anything he wanted," I said. "And you raised me to believe I should let him." Another silence. Then, "I'm sorry, Angela." 2 words. My father, who had never said them in 56 years of living. I know because I'd been counting.
Thank you, Dad.
But sorry doesn't give me back 6 years. I softened because anger wasn't the point anymore. Anger is just another way of staying in a room with people who hurt you. Take care of yourself. Take care of Mom. I hung up. The autumn wind carried the last of the conversation down an empty street in a city that had nothing to do with where I came from. I didn't forgive him that day, but I didn't hate him either. I just let the line go quiet and kept walking. The paper came out in September, 14 months after I'd driven east into a sunrise. A peer-reviewed journal. Well-cited. The kind of publication that opens doors for people who are serious about the work. And there on the first page, in 12-point Times New Roman, Adams, N. First author. Sole author. The algorithm had grown. What had started as a dynamic pattern learning system in a flickering lab at a state university had become something larger, a self-correcting framework with documented applications in healthcare data processing, environmental modeling, and large-scale logistics optimization. I had taken the seed Marcus stole and grown it into something he could never claim. Dr. Anand read the acceptance notification over my shoulder and squeezed my arm. "This is going to open a lot of doors, Naomi." That evening I printed a copy and held it up to the desk lamp, watching the light glow through the paper. My name, my work, nobody else's fingerprints on it. An email arrived from Dr. Bell at 10:22 p.m. No subject line. 2 words in the body. "Told you." I laughed out loud, alone in my room, at 10:22 on a Tuesday, the kind of laugh you save for people who believed in you before you'd learned to believe in yourself. I framed the first page. Small frame, dark wood, glass front. I set it on my desk next to the only photograph I'd brought from home. My grandmother, standing in the garden, squinting into the sun, smiling like she already knew the ending. 2 women who saw me, one by blood, one by choice. A year after I left, I sat on a bench along the water with my laptop open on my knees and a new project running on the screen, an algorithm that had never been touched by anyone but me, solving a problem nobody had asked me to solve, because I could, because it mattered, because this is what the work looks like when it's yours. I thought about Marcus at 10 years old, adjusting the base plate on a Lego castle, looking at me and saying, "There. Now it'll hold." He'd known how to build things once. Somewhere between then and 20, he'd decided it was easier to take. I thought about my mother lighting candles every Sunday for a family that didn't exist the way she needed it to. I thought about my father popping champagne over a son whose success had been built in someone else's midnight hours. I don't know if my family will heal. I don't know if Marcus will ever take responsibility. I don't know if my mother will ever choose the hard truth over the comfortable story. But I know this. I am not responsible for their choices. Only for mine. And I chose myself. I closed the laptop. The screen went dark. The river moved below me, carrying everything downstream toward open water. I didn't destroy my brother. I just stopped building the floor he was standing on. I stood up, slung my bag over my shoulder, and walked toward campus. The evening was warm. The path was lit. My steps were light. If this story stirred something in you, sit with it. Ask yourself what you're still building for someone who stopped deserving it. Then start building something only yours.